All right, welcome back. So this is our final lesson in, or mini course, I guess, final lesson in the mini course on how to write an awesome short story. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far, and that you've been able to generate some really interesting story ideas and a couple of characters, put them together in your 5-section plotting template, and gotten down to doing some writing. And hopefully you're ready to finish off that first draft. So what I want to talk to you about today is revision. And I know I've discussed some aspects of revision in the last lesson, but today we're going to finalize it up and fix it up for good, and then move on to the next step. So let's have a look here at what we're going to do today. These are my top 5 revising tips for maximum writing impact. They're what I call the most effective ones. So you could spend a lot of time revising, doing a lot of different things, looking for a lot of different things in your work. But these are the top 5 things that will improve your writing immensely. You get the most bang for the buck for these. So let's get right on to it. First of all, as you go through your draft, look at swapping out your boring pedestrian verbs with awesome action verbs. So here are a couple of examples. First is the boring verb would be walk. So I use walk all the time in my first draft. He walked to the car, he did this, he did that. So why not switch that out and replace it with an action verb like limped or crawled or sprinted or any number of those things. That will give a better indication of how the person actually moves. And what this does, of course, is it generates a better picture in the reader's mind of what's actually going on. If your hero crawled back to his car, that's a really powerful visual compared to the fellow walking back to the car. So that's one example. The other one is look. Look is one of those verbs that appears in a lot of first drafts, mine included. And so what I like to do is go back and change some of them out. So I'll see if there's a better verb I can use to replace look. So that's where we get things like peek or glared or glimpsed or what have you in those in place of look. So the idea here is to go through your story, do a search or find on some of these words that are pedestrian like this and kind of boring, and start to replace them, and you will see your story magically come to life. It's amazing how well this works. The second tip: use active voice instead of a passive voice. So what do I mean by this? Well, here again are a couple of examples. A passive voice would be, he was going to the store. So I see this a lot in first-time writers. He was doing this, she was going there. And that's passive. What we want to do is replace the was going with an action verb. So instead of he was going to the store, how about he ran to the store, or he crawled to the store, or he raced to the store, as opposed to just was going. In the other example, the starship was firing all weapons. How about the starship fired all weapons? What this does is it makes the writing come alive again. It replaces this was verb, the to be verb here, with an action verb. So it gets rid of the was going and the was firing, the was speaking, and it replaces it with a verb that's much more powerful than that. So this improves the efficiency of your writing quite a bit. So again, do a search and replace on these sorts of things. Here's the third secret: misuse of the ing verbs. Oh my goodness. Okay, so ing verbs drive me absolutely crazy when they are misused. So in this first example here, tip number 3, I want to focus on simultaneity. And I know I've talked about this before, where in our writing, that things have to happen chronologically in order to make sense for the reader, even though in real life they might not. But here's an example of a real problem and the type of sentence that I often see in writing. Walking down the hall, he touched her cheek. Okay, so we understand what the writer is supposed to be saying here, or trying to say. That is, okay, he's walking down the hall. When he gets to the end, he touches her cheek. but it doesn't come across that way. It sounds like he's actually touching her cheek while he's walking down the hall at the same time. That's a bit of a trick. A bit of contortionism might be involved here. So we want to fix that. And the easiest way to fix this, if you don't want to rewrite your entire sentence, is just to put the word after in front of it all. After walking down the hall, he touched her cheek. So now it makes sense. Okay, so of course you can rewrite it and say, you know, Joe walked down the hall and at the end he touched her cheek, and that's fine. You can do that too. But if you're just looking for a quick shift here, a quick change, just put the word after. By doing this, we're breaking up the simultaneity of the sentence, and we're creating one that is now chronologically correct. First he walks down the hall, then he touches her cheek. So these are a little more difficult to find because if you're anything like me, you become blind to your own writing after a little while, and we just don't see them anymore. So it's a good idea to have someone else read your work, read your story, and identify these sorts of things. So here's an example from a very famous, well-known author who used to write children's, I guess, well, now she writes mysteries. But anyway, but here's an example of one that got printed, that one that got missed by editors, got missed by the writer. Running to Izzy's office, Robin unlocked it, dashed to her desk, pulled one of the listening devices from the box of Tampax, scooped up a pile of out-of-date agendas as an alibi, then ran back out into the corner. That's a lot of things you have to do while you're running to Izzy's office. So you see the problem here? Robin is running to Izzy's office while unlocking it and dashing to her desk at the same time. It can't happen. It doesn't work. So the way to fix this, as you know now, would simply be to put after running to Izzy's office. Robin unlocked it. So that's a really unfortunate problem that got through editors and everyone else and got published. So once you're aware of this, you start to see it everywhere. Here's another one. Tip number 4, more nasty ing verbs. You tell what my emphasis is here just by the number of ings going on. This one is the misplaced modifier. Okay, so for tip number 3 and tip number 4, these nasty ing verbs, I blame your grade 5 English teacher for that. Because she probably told you, oh, Billy, oh, Sally, this is such wonderful writing the way you've done it. Oh, and she encouraged us to keep doing this. And now you spend the rest of your life trying to fix these things. But here's an example of the misplaced modifier. Watching the sunset, the air was cool on my face. So I think I know what the writer's trying to say here. The writer's trying to say that I'm out there, I'm watching the sunset, and it's cool, and I can feel the cool air on my face. But the writer is not doing it correctly, because in this sense, the noun air does not line up with watching the sunset. So watching the sunset, I felt the cool air on my face. That's the way to fix this, because now it's the I that's doing the watching, not the air that's doing the watching. So that's one thing that another type of ing problem that if you fix that will really dramatically improve your writing, like 100%. It's so important to get this right, because something like this will trip your reader up. It will kick them out of the story, and they'll put the book away. So we don't want that. We want to fix these things up as we go along. So when you're revising, one idea you can look at is doing a search function on ing and seeing what comes up. Not everyone, of course, is going to be bad. But some of them are, and we want to catch those ones and fix them up. The last one that I think has the most impact on fixing up stories is this one. And it's to be mindful of the verb to be that occurs at the beginning of sentences. So these are things like was, are, were, all of those types of verbs we need to be careful of. It's not that we can't use them, so make no mistake. We can use these things, but only if we're using them with intention. Often we use these because we fall into telling mode. instead of showing mode. And what the reader truly wants is to get that mental movie going in their mind where they can actually see the action and they can see what's going on instead of simply being told what's happening. So here's an example. The night was humid. Okay, so you're telling me that the night is humid. Thank you, Mr. Narrator. You're telling me the night was humid. Thank you very much. But it doesn't show me how humid it is. So a better way of writing this might be, and this is just an example, the town sweat under a warm, moist blanket of night air. Okay, you get a sense of how hot it is. Or the fellow's shirt stuck to him because it was so humid. That kind of thing. So we actually get a real image of how humid the night actually was. Okay. The key here is looking for these verbs, the to be verbs, at the beginning of sentences, because that's usually a clue that you've gone into telling mode. So when you see it here, the night was humid, that's telling. If was or were or is or are appear later on in the sentence, that's fine. Don't worry about those ones. It's really the ones that happen at the beginning. And of course, there are exceptions to this. Some of the most famous, well, here's one of the most famous lines in all of English literature. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. So clearly Dickens has used it was on purpose here with intention. And if you actually read the beginning of Tale of Two Cities, you see what he's doing here. He's really writing a poem, in a sense, at the beginning of this story. Everything with that is absolutely fine because it's done with intention. It's done for dramatic effect, so it works. But for mere mortals like the rest of us, we need to be a little bit careful of how often we say things like, there was a knock at the door. It was a dark and stormy night. She was really worried about her son. Those are the things that we need to pay attention to as writers. Okay? So if you keep those 5 tips in mind, your writing is going to improve so much, and you'll get that revision done in no time, and you will look absolutely brilliant. I guarantee your friends and family are going to look at you and say, wow, this is really good. And you know what? It will be good. Okay, so what's the next step to do then? Okay, I'm assuming that you've finished your first draft, you've done some revision, you've done some tweaks, you've fixed it up with these tips. And now what? Now it's time to move on to the next story. Don't go back and revise or re-edit again and again and again. That's for me, that there's a law of diminishing returns here, and it will just be awful. So and you'll never finish, of course. So finish that story, get it done, move on to the next one. Everything you've learned from writing that first short story, you now take into the next one. And so your next one is going to be a little bit better than your first one, and so on and so forth. It's a cumulative effect, so that by the time you get to your 10th short story, it's going to be really, really good, because you'll be writing this way almost intuitively now. You won't have to go back and do nearly as much editing and revising. Okay? So congratulations. I hope it's been a wonderful experience for you. I'm really glad you signed up for the mini course on how to write an awesome short story. If you did enjoy this, I'd really love to hear from you. And so be sure to send me an email or a comment on it. Anything you'd like to tell me is just fine. You also might be interested in one of our in-person workshops too, if you're in and around the Ottawa area. You can see what's being offered currently at ottawawritingworkshops.com. You can also find our workshops on eventbrite.ca, and we're all there. And if there's something that you'd really like to do, but it's not being offered at this time, just let me know, and I'll see what I can do for scheduling it in the future. Anyway, it's been my real pleasure working with you and showing you how to write an awesome short story. Really hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you back again. Bye for now.